So playing in movie theaters right now is a movie called Werewolves. It's a creature feature, and one night a year on this night, there's an event called a supermoon. If you're exposed to moonlight on this night, you turn into a werewolf, all meant for themselves. And if you're thinking to yourself immediately, that sounds exactly like The Purge, just with werewolves, you would be right. That's exactly what it is. And it also stars Frank Grillo for a little bit of irony because he also starred in one of the Purge movies. But while watching this movie, I really only had one question when I was watching him act. What is this guy's workout plan and diet? This guy is almost pushing 60. What? So watching Werewolves in a movie theater is definitely one of the strangest movie-going experiences I've had in all of 2024. But before we get into that, as always, if you want to support the channel, comment down below, subscribe, give your thoughts on whatever I have to say. It really does help the channel, only takes 2 seconds. So as I was saying, the reason this movie is so strange is because it feels like it would be something you would watch on Sci-Fi or Tubi when you were high at 2 in the morning. This doesn't feel like the type of movie that would make it to a movie theater. When you see how these werewolves look, when you see the simplicity of this plot, it's basically The Purge with werewolves. We don't get a lot of movies like this that are so low budget, so B-movie, and they go to movie theaters. So whether or not you like this movie, whether or not it works for you, this movie will be an experience you're probably not going to get the rest of the year. What you have going on in this, as I just said, it stars Frank Grillo, and you have this event that's called a supermoon, where one night of the year, people transform into werewolves if they're exposed to moonlight. It's that simple. Let me just say off the bat, I had a pretty hard time getting into this film, even though I know it's a low-budget movie, it's a B-horror movie, because they're trying to explain what's happening on this night. They're trying to look for a cure. They're getting the basic setup where you're meeting these characters and everyone's incentives. And I know you have to have a little bit of a background for what this movie is going to be about, but I just didn't care about any of these characters. I wanted to see the werewolves. That's why we're all here. I know you need something to go off of so that we care about these characters and we care about the werewolves we're eventually going to see, but I just didn't care about any of it. I wanted the werewolf stuff to start immediately. I thought the first 20-30 minutes of this movie, when it's getting going and you're learning about this antidote and all this stuff, I thought it was pointless and boring. I did not like it at all. But as I said, Frank Grillo is the star of this one, and I think he's one of the most underrated action stars in all of Hollywood, honestly. In the past 5 to 10 years, he's the lead in some of my favorite action movies, so it kind of gives this movie the flair I think it deserves to get to movie theaters, so I was interested in checking it out. I also talked to the director of this, Steve Miller, on Twitter. He seems like a really cool guy. I always like supporting independent films before I went into this. So there was a couple of good things this movie had going for it before I even stepped in the seat, but that's kind of where it all ends. Because you see, this is to its core a creature feature B-horror movie to the T. It is old school. It feels like it's right out of the 80s, as I said, right off of Tubi, right off of Sci-Fi. And the problem this movie has is the cardinal sin of movies. It is just boring, in my opinion. I was not engaged in this film at all. I thought this was easily one of the harder watches of the year, where there's such a simple premise. There's something that could be so fun. A B movie about werewolves taking place in the form of The Purge. You could have so much cool stuff. You could have so much action, so many unique kills. This movie doesn't really execute on any of its premise to make you feel like this is a warranted movie. This movie feels way too generic, way too colored by numbers. There's really no fun to be had with that premise. You're just watching these people walk around on the night where these people are werewolves, and there's just not a lot of interesting stuff going on. And Frank Grillo is trying his hardest in this to carry this as the action lead, but everybody else, man, it feels like they're all just packing it in. The acting in this film is really, really bad. It was really hard for me to get over it. Everybody in this film besides him is really subpar. And I usually give movies like this that are low budget B movies a break for that, but it was just really hard to get over. I could not get over how bad the acting was outside of him. It took me completely out of it. And the hurdle that movies like this usually have to get over is that they are so low budget, they need to use CGI and practical effects on these creatures. This movie really struggles with that, in my opinion, because they show you the creatures sometimes in the form of snarling and in the dark, but this movie is annoying to a fault in the way they show these monsters. There's so much strobe light usage, so many sharp cuts, so many flickering lights, so many quick jumps. It just started giving me a headache, the way they have to hide these monsters. I don't know if it was an editing mistake or something they didn't go back and notice. Maybe it was just me and my tolerance, but to me, it started to get really annoying that every single time you see these monsters, it's very quick, jagged cuts. Lights are flickering, they're flashing, very strobe-like effects. It's just something that bothers me, and this movie just loved it. They went back to the well and did that about 5 or 6 major scenes. And getting a little bit nitpicky about this one, there's really no central purpose to this film. It's just The Purge, and you're walking around on the street, and this guy's trying to get back to his family, and since there's nothing really fun with the premise and how they're trying to do this, it feels like there's really no point to this film, because we've seen this movie a dozen times. We have all of those Purge movies, we have Dog Soldiers, we have other iconic werewolf movies. When I entered the theater for this one, I wouldn't say I had expectations, but I expected to have a pretty good time with it. My expectations were low. low. I thought it was going to be big dumb fun. We were going to get to see some werewolves in a creative way. And this movie just didn't do anything that I wanted it to do. Like I said, it's not lost on me. There's going to be some people that have a really good time with this one. It just never got there for me. I was just bored stiff in this one. So overall, I really don't have too much else to say about this one. I went into this one expecting to have a dumb good time because it's a B horror movie, and I was painfully bored. I didn't think the acting was particularly good at all. I think the story is very vanilla. We've seen this movie a dozen times, just better. Nobody's good at acting at all outside of Frank Grillo. I do enjoy him as a lead, but there's just nothing fun with this premise that I wanted them to do. They don't do anything creative with the werewolves. Feels like it's a very run-of-the-mill, low-budget action movie. I think this is a huge missed opportunity, in my opinion. I think it's background noise. So comment down below. Let me know if you've seen this one. Let me know if you had a good time with it, if you got over that hurdle, or if you were just bored with me, you thought the acting stunk. As always, if you haven't subscribed yet, join me down below. I love talking to you. Peace.